what I say to another person doesn't matter nearly as much as what they say to themselves. It's the identity that has to be changed, and that's inner work. Time traveling is when your focus is on something that happened in the past or might happen in the future, but is not on what's happening in the moment. Animals don't narrate the situation. They don't ask, what does this mean? Human beings, we have the ability to narrate our lives, and that narration is useful, but it also becomes a weakness when we can't be present in the present moment. If you hedge your bets, the problem is you can never get most return on anything because you have more than one line in the water. Many people are emotionally attached to things because they've always been doing it. Anything you chase runs away from you. You don't control the outcome. All you control is, did I do my process right? The inner work must occur before the outer work is going to stick.
How do we go about building that level of abundance when it's not there on paper, if you will?
The most important thing is you have to stop it.
Welcome to The Edge of Possible, the podcast dedicated to helping you achieve extraordinary things. I'm your host, Cameron Atlas, and together, let's unlock your edge. We're all capable of achieving something extraordinary in our own unique way, but often there's a frustrating gap between our raw potential and our ability to actually perform when the pressure's on. Too often, high performers try to keep their options open, hedging their bets out of a fear that their primary focus might not work out. But what if holding onto that safety net is the exact thing preventing you from reaching your highest level of success? Well, that's exactly why I brought today's guest, Dre Baldwin, onto the show. Dre is a former professional basketballer who successfully transformed his relentless on-court discipline into a highly successful digital business. And today is the creator of the Work on Your Game framework. In this episode, you're not only going to hear Dre's story of transitioning from the court to the boardroom, but we also walk through the exact steps that you can use to get clear on your direction, build your mental toughness, and execute consistently even when you're under pressure. That's coming right up here on The Edge of Possible. Dre, what's the biggest insight you've discovered around closing the gap between, someone's potential and their ability to actually perform when it matters most?
Answer to that, Cameron, is collapsed identity. That means removing hedges, removing optionality, and elimination. Eliminating in order to move forward so that you are collapsing your identity into a singular focus rather than trying to do so many things all at the same time, which always dilutes the signal.
How does someone go about that?
Well, it's easy. It's actually, no, it's simple, but not easy. The simple process is looking at all the things that you're doing and asking yourself, which of these things, and maybe more than one at first, can I do at a level that is above and beyond most other people who are doing it, who have done it as much as I have? Where could I differentiate myself in the marketplace with what I'm doing? When someone asks themselves that question and answers honestly, they should come up with no more than maybe 3 things that they are currently partaking in. They may be partaking in 15, but no more than 3 where you really could differentiate yourself from everybody else in the market. And in order to get focus, you have to be willing to eliminate everything that is not on that list. And eliminating those, and when you want to get singular, then you have to eliminate all but one. And the biggest challenge with this is not that deductive process. Anybody can do that. The challenge with it is many people are emotionally attached to things, not because they're that good at it, not because it's producing a higher level of return, but because they've always been doing it. And this is just a confirmation bias and a commitment bias, because I've committed time, attention, energy, focus, maybe even money, and maybe even made money and got attention from doing a thing. Well, it's hard for me to walk away from that thing because look at all these resources I've put into it and all these results I've gotten out of it. Why would I walk away from it? And the reason you walk away from it is because if you want to reach your fullest potential, you have to do something that can separate you in the marketplace. And that thing is not going to separate you in the marketplace. It's a simple reasoning, but not easy one to grasp.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I find it's very, again, a simple piece, but challenging when the things that we need to let go of are maybe some things we actually enjoy. And, it's somewhat easy to let go of the things that all right, I know I've got to leave this behind and I'm going to go fully in. But I know those things, when it's something that's actually enjoyable, something that's actually, they get something from it, that it makes it a little bit more challenging. Do you find that?
Yes, exactly. That's the whole problem. Those are what we call the sacred cows, but you got to kill the sacred cows.
Yeah. Yeah. So what about someone who believes they have from a potential standpoint, but maybe haven't developed that over time. So I know for me, like it's taken thousands and thousands and thousands of hours to be able to execute in the way that I do now. Same with clients as well. How does someone go about thinking about it if they maybe have certain potential and they've known that they've had that, but they might not have developed the skill set to be able to execute over and over again?
To execute on the thing they have potential at?
Yeah. But the potential might be, again, it's a subjective piece. Like, yeah, I think I could be good at this, for example, but I haven't really dedicated the time, effort, energy. And I might be really good at something over here, like you're suggesting, but it might not be enabling me to, as you mentioned, like cut through the market and have that differentiation. But the thing maybe that hasn't been developed over time. I'll give an example. So over the last number of years, piano's been an instrument of mine for more than 30 years, and I'll deliver keynotes with live music on stage with the grand piano. And there are certain events, a decent number of events that can't get a grand piano, right? And so during the last 6 years, added guitar, and it for me to be able to add the guitar, to be able to confidently be on stage and to be able to execute, right, to be able to perform, it took for me to, 2,000 hours over the first 500 days, like 4 hours a day, every day over the first 500 days on average to get to a stage where I could actually then execute. And so it wasn't until I started actually executing on that I realized that, this is really something. And it all of a sudden became almost an obsession during that period of time, because I knew that it was the number one skill for me to develop during that period, to be able to come out the other end where probably 70-80% of the keynotes now are guitar only, whereas before it needed to have a piano on stage. So what are your thoughts on that?
So for someone else, let's say one of your clients or one of your listeners, how much experience are we talking? Are we talking a brand new person, a person who's 10 years in, somebody doing something that they've never done before? Where are they?
Let's go a mix. Let's talk about a mix. So let's look at someone who, oh man, you know what? Like I've been doing this for 20, 30 years and I'm so invested in it because of the money, the time, the effort, the return. All of these things have happened from it. But I've heard this with people coming up to afterwards and saying, yeah, you know what? I've been doing this career for this period of time, but it's not really, like I've got this other area that I'm more passionate about or that I could potentially execute on, but I haven't actually had the courage to be doing that. So let's start there, and then let's go maybe someone who's got a bit of experience at least.
So a person who's brand new, I would give them a little bit different advice than what I said a few minutes ago, in that when you're brand new, you want to have a bunch of hooks in the water, a bunch of lines in the water to see what bites, because you want to try different things out to find out, where is my opportunity? Where is my market advantage? Where is the market responding to me? The market being the people who are willing to give you money for what you have. And once you start to get some bites and some things are getting no response whatsoever, you can iterate, you can make changes, and then you can start to slowly eliminate and focus a little bit more on certain things. When it gets to the person who, let's say, is about 10 years in, after about 10 years of dedicated work on a thing, you're about as good as you're going to be. You can squeeze a few extra percentage points out of it, but you're about as good as you're going to be at the technical side of that thing for the most part, or as good as you need to be. Let me put it that way. At the technical side of it, all other things that you have going on, you have to look at them all and ask yourself, where's the best potential here? Now, there's no guarantee that you're going to guess right. You might guess wrong. And this is where you pass that point of no return, as we call it proverbially. The point of no return is when you drop everything else and say, I'm going to go all in on this thing, but no guarantee that it's necessarily going to work out. But if I don't go all in on it, there's no way I can get the highest level of return on investment from that thing. This is the challenge that keeps a lot of people, especially high level people, high performers, high capability people, high capacity, from getting to their highest possible level, because they don't want to drop these other options, because they want to give themselves an opt-out. Okay, if that doesn't work, I still have this. If this doesn't work, I have this. In our world, we call that hedging. You're hedging your bets. But if you hedge your bets, the problem is you can never get the most return on anything, because you have more than one line in the water. You got to put everything into one shot and make sure you watch the hell out of that shot and make sure that it produces the return that you want it to produce, because that's the biggest chance that you have of getting to your full potential, getting your full potential out of yourself, whatever vocation you choose.
It's really interesting. Like going with the example that I shared before for myself and the guitar specifically, I don't think there'd be another time, like this was during pandemic time when, certain things were, didn't have to be executed on, that enabled me to really focus in on the time and the effort and the energy that was required to do that. And towards the end, because I started off with an hour a day, right? And I'd go, all right, we've got to just do an hour a day. That would be amazing. And then I slowly but surely, the conviction and the obsession continue to kick in and then had this sheet set out. Okay, if I do this many hours, I could get to if I'm doing like 7 or 8 hours, maybe even 9 hours, towards the end, I could get to these 2,000 hours just in the first 500 days, let alone everything that comes after that. But yeah, it did take like a full on obsession during that period to be able to execute in that way. So I guess for someone listening then who wants to do that, who wants to choose something but hasn't, and you said that holds a lot of people back. What is the thing that holds them back the most? Is there fear there? Is there something else? Like what have you found from the experience you've had? Because you've obviously been doing this for a long period of time now.
Number one thing is fear. It's the fear is fear on different sides. It's multiple dimensions of it. One is the fear of dropping let's say you have 5 things going on and they're all producing on some level. It's the fear of dropping the other 4 okay, I'm dropping these other 4. So now I'm going to lose whatever positive benefit I was getting from these 4. I'm no longer going to have because I'm going to cease engaging in them. And there's also the fear of if I drop these 4 and only focus on this one, what if this one doesn't work out? Now I turn my back on the other 4 and now this one doesn't work out. So now here I am sitting here I don't have anything. I dropped the 4 things, can't go back to those. Now I'm stuck with this one thing and it's not working. And this is the hedging. This is why hedging comes in. This is why most human beings hedge. This is why most of the people, I would bet most of the guests you've had on the show, if you ask them to describe themselves, what they do for a living, they have flashes. I do this and this and this and this and this. Most professionals, most entrepreneurs especially, describe themselves that way. And that's hedging. They're giving themselves that slash. So if this one doesn't work, I got that. If that doesn't work, I have this. And they have all these fallbacks. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, because you hear a lot of people say, well, I heard the average millionaire has 7 streams of income, so I got to be doing 7 different things. That's not quite how it works, but a lot of people rationalize it that way. That's the way they logic it out. But that's where the hedging comes from, is the fear on both sides of dropping stuff and the fear of committing and then being wrong when you commit.
For someone then that decent number of the folks that listen to this, maybe they're fairly far into their career, they might have kids, they've got other levels of responsibility to just drop and not be strategic about it, and then find themselves in 6 months' time go, damn, what was I thinking? That might not be an option. And yet we want to be able to make this selection to be able to bring out the absolute best in ourselves. So how does someone go about making that decision? Let's come back full circle to when you started. How does someone go about strategically and courageously and methodically, if you will, making that decision in a way that increases the odds that they're actually going to be able to say, wow, that really did work out?
Yeah, I'm gonna challenge you on that, saying that it might not be an option. I think it's an option for everybody. Now, they may not want to take the option, but it is an option. It's an uncomfortable option, but it's an option. Mm-hmm. And the way they can do it strategically is very simple. We know the 80-20 principle. 80% of your results are usually coming from 20% of your inputs. So let's look at all the things that you have going on, a professional, high performer, and let's see, okay, what are the most important returns you want in life? Do you want social media followers? Are you trying to make money? Are you trying to get meaning? Are you trying to make friends? What is it that you're looking for? I had to ask them those questions first. Let's say that they say is money. Okay, my most important thing is I want to produce money. Okay, let's look at the 8 things you have going on. How much money are you making from each one of these 8? We'll weigh it all out and we will mathematically make it clear on paper that everybody can see, here's where the money's coming from, these 3 things. Okay, these 5, they can go. You can drop these 5. If your focus is money, clearly these 5 are not producing money. You see it, right? Okay, you gave me the numbers. Okay, so I didn't make these up. So this is where we're at. So now we have these 3. Okay, are these 3 symbiotic in some way? I.e., this one is serving this one and this one is serving that one. If not, they're disparate. Okay, let's figure out which one can we focus on. If you put all of your resources into this, can we double or triple this number to where it it replaces the money from these other two to where it could actually supersede the money from the other two, and you're making the most money just doing this? Or would that be from this one? Or would that be from this one? Or can two of these work together? We just drop the third one, to where doing this one also serves that one, but it's not like you're doing two different jobs. Now, we would strategically and mathematically break this down to where it is obvious, it is on paper, that you can see why this logically makes sense. The challenge for most human beings, Cameron, is not logic. The challenge is emotion, because emotion overpowers logic. Anything can be laid out logically on paper by a person who can think, read, write, and count. It's the emotion connected to the logic that causes most people to hedge and want to go back, because their emotion is saying, logically that makes sense, but my emotion is saying, well, I want to hold on to this because I'm investing in it, because it's fun, because I have friends there, because I have family there, because my grandma liked it, or whatever the thing is. That's what gets people in the way, is their emotions.
What I love about what you just shared there is I think there's two key components to it. There is the methodical piece, there's the logical piece, and there's the emotional piece. We'll come to the emotional piece in a moment. What I like about writing things down is it makes it more objective. It makes it, okay, now I can see it. Now I can see it for what it is, versus it could be in their heads, oh yeah, maybe I should do this, maybe I should do that. And in doing so, if they do then go and make a decision, and it's out of alignment with what would enable them to get the results, they were setting themselves up for disappointment to begin with. And so instead, if we can bring both of these together and ensure that they're making decisions that, again, it's a methodical, strategic decision rather than just an emotional one, then, it increases the likelihood that they're going to be able to actually continue executing. So we've got the criteria in place, then comes the emotion, right? So you said, like, from an emotional standpoint, sometimes maybe there's fear. What else do you notice once it comes to that point with the people that you work with? It comes to a point where, well, yeah, this makes all the sense in the world that I would fully focus on this specific area of my business or life, and I'm going to get rid of all of this other stuff. What are the emotions that come up, and how do you deal with it?
Well, the most important emotion that comes up is they don't have as much time in this collapsed identity as they have in the spread out hedged identity. So it's a matter of, let's say this person's 50 years old. They've been a professional since they were 21. So we have 30 or so years of one way of doing things going against this last 2 hours they've been talking to me about doing something. So that's the competition, is how's this 2 hours of mental momentum going to overcome 30 years of programming? So it's getting them some tangible results. They have to get some tangible results quickly and early. They have to logically understand why this makes sense, and it has to be reinforced to them over and over again, because they have to accept it emotionally on a subconscious level, on an identity level, in order for the change to really take hold. Because it can't just be, well, here's how Dre sees it. It has to be how they see it, because what I say to another person doesn't matter nearly as much as what they say to themselves. So they have to accept it. They have to accept it on an identity level such that they can execute on anything that I'm showing them, sharing with them, telling them. They still have to go out there and do it. So it's the identity that has to be changed, and that's inner work. And I help people with the inner work, because the inner work must occur before the outer work is going to stick. People can do outer work, Cameron, temporarily, if they're properly motivated, excited, if there's some momentum. But over time, over weeks and months, they're not going to keep doing this new thing if their identity if it doesn't tether to their identity, and they don't see themselves as a certain type of person. Because if they don't, they're going to revert back to whoever they were before, as soon as they're not in the presence of whoever or whatever gave them that energetic push in the first place. This is the person who goes to some conference, some seminar, and they get all excited because they hear some great speaker, and they feel good for about 3 days. But then when they get back home and they're in their normal environment that they've been programmed for, that motivation wears off, and they go right back to doing what they were doing before.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Identity is hugely important, because it's the way I see it is it's the difference between, oh, this is what I do versus this is who I am. And then this is what I do. There's actions that you can take, as you're mentioning, and it is usually going to be temporary unless you can move this over to a point where it is, oh, this is who I am, and it would feel weird and out of alignment if I didn't act in this way. Yeah, whether it is, like you said, a seminar or some other external source of motivation in those moments, it feels like you can be unstoppable, but it's, when no one else is around, when you've got to be executing over and over again, when it's difficult, when it's challenging, your ability to be able to follow through largely is going to be from, okay, this is who I am though. And regardless of what comes up, I know that I'm going to execute on this. So you said about getting some quick wins on the board early. Do you recommend that somebody then goes all in immediately once they've made the decision on paper? Or is there a period of time where it's, all right, a month, for example, just go for a month and let's see what happens. And just to get those wins on the board, the momentum on the board, or like, what's your approach with that?
Ideally is going all in.
All in?
Not everybody is wired for that. I'm wired for it. I do things all in. If I decide I'm doing something and I have the pieces in place, I drop all the old stuff that day and I pick up the new stuff that day. Now, some people, it may be, okay, let's just try this for a week. Let's try this for your next 2 or 3 sales calls. Let's do it this way and see how it goes. If you need to kind of walk them into it, because some people, there's going to be resistance. That drop everything and change everything now, that spontaneity, not everybody is built for doing that, and it makes them more afraid and more resistant than it does make them compliant. So with some people, you have to calibrate, how can we get this to start working? But the ultimate outcome is we are dropping all the old stuff and we're going to get into the new stuff. It's just that not everybody is ready to make that type of change, especially when the excitement of the conversation has worn off, as I talked about earlier. Some people, they have to kind of see it a little bit and feel it a bit and kind of dip their toes in the water, see that it's okay, then they're willing to get all the way in. But if I had my ideal person or I'm dealing with myself, I'm just jumping into the deep end of the pool.
Yeah, the earlier one of somebody who, might need a little bit of reinforcement, if you will, before really, really jumping all the way in. Fear really kicks in often, doesn't it? And it's, if someone burns the bridges, burns the boats, burns like, okay, we're not going back, we're all in. And this is what I think about this sometimes, like ideally it is all in, right? As you mentioned. And for certain people, if that then, sales calls you just mentioned as an example, if someone then has an unconscious fear, subconscious fear that's kicking in when they're making those calls because they now need it to happen because now they've gone all in and they've left this on the table from a monetary standpoint and the deal standpoint, then what can kick in for certain people is scarcity. Is I need this sale now. And I don't know, I'm sure you've experienced this. I know I've definitely experienced this at different times where you can smell that coming a mile away. Right? And the ability to be able to bring the best version of yourself, but the most empowered version of yourself to a situation when you've gone all in. I've seen that be really difficult and challenging for some folks.
Absolutely. And the key is it's kind of a mental hypnotism you play on yourself. I've never been hypnotized, but the idea is even when you need the sale, your energy can't say that you need the sale. And I've been on sales calls where I needed the sale, but I didn't behave as if I needed the sale and I made the sale. And that's the energy you have to put forth, because if you feel like you need something, anything you chase runs away from you. That's just the way the universe works, because it's not a chase if it's not running away. And anything you walk away from chases after you. So you have to conduct yourself with the energy of I already have. That's abundance thinking. And when you have the energy of I already have something, more of that thing comes your way. This is the law of inertia. Object in motion tends to remain in motion. And when you conduct yourself as if you don't have something, then nobody wants to give it to you because you don't already have it. People don't want to engage with something that doesn't already have a whole lot there. Because who wants to engage with someone who doesn't have anything? Nobody chases after a parked vehicle is the metaphor that I like to give people in my audience. And I give them the example of, you think of, where are you located, Cameron?
Austin, Texas.
Okay, so in Austin, Texas, you get off of the highway, there's some guy standing there with a plastic cup asking for a change. And he'll stand there for 8 hours, and over the course of a day, he might collect $20 to $30 in coins and dollar bills. It's clear he doesn't have a lot of money, but nobody wants to give him any. And if they do give him something, they might give him $1. Now, there's some rich guy who lives in Austin, and he goes to the most expensive restaurant in town, and he gets his meal comped, and he doesn't have to pay for it. Even though he can clearly pay, he doesn't have to pay for anything. And the guy who can't pay, nobody wants to give him any money. This is the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. Why? Because when you have an energy of abundance, people want to give you more. And we have an energy of scarcity, nobody wants to give you anything. So this is how the gap continues to widen between the people who are already going in one direction and people going in another direction. And this is not societal, it's scientific. Again, this is inertia. Object not in motion tends to not be in motion. Colloquially, we call these momentum and stagnation. So mentally, you have to put yourself in the frame of mind that even when you have nothing, that you have everything. Because when you carry yourself with that energy and you truly believe it, then everybody wants to give you more because it feels like you already have it.
Mm. How does someone go about building that then for someone who doesn't have it? Because I imagine this when someone's going for, taking a shot to win the championship, for example, their ability to be able to execute in that moment is like they cannot afford to be worrying about what if I miss? What if I don't make this shot? Right? The thinking there, that can't come in. Otherwise, there's going to be the wobbles that kick in. And this is often what happens when in Australia, it's like I can't remember what the exact wording is, but in Australian sport, it's like basically the heebie-jeebies, right? You go after and after, over and over again, and it gets worse over time because they start getting in their head. And so how does someone go about who may not have experienced this before or is in a funk at the moment? How do we go about building that level of abundance when it's not there, like on paper, if you will, but we need to be acting in that way?
You have to stop thinking. The most important thing is you have to stop thinking about it. Now, my background is in professional sports, so I would have athletes come to me all the time. I played basketball. They would say, Dre, when I get into a game, what should be my mindset during the game so I can take my practice skills and bring them into the game? And I said, during the game, there is no mindset. I don't have a mindset during the game because once the game starts, I'm not thinking. When I give a keynote speech, once I get on the stage, I'm not thinking. I already know what I need to say. Now I'm just delivering the message to the audience. I'm not thinking about anything because the work has already been done. So a professional, by definition, does their homework. And by doing your homework, what I mean is you prepare for the situation before it occurs. That's the definition of a professional. You've already seen it before it happens. So when the situation happens, you're already ready for it. And when you get into the situation, you don't have to think at all because you're already prepared and you can go off of instinct. So I don't know if you or anyone in your audience follows combat sports, but there's a concept in combat sports called letting your hands go. When you're in a boxing match, for example, they say, let your hands go. What that means is you can't be in a boxing match thinking about what punch to throw, because by the time you think about throwing a punch, you got hit in the face 3 times. You have to let your hands go and you operate off instinct. And that instinct was programmed in you in the practice gym. That's not something that you think about when the fight comes up. So for a person who hasn't done it before, they're getting called on to make the game-winning shot. You're not thinking about the fact that this is the game-winning shot and there's pressure, et cetera, et cetera. You're just going out there thinking not at all. You're just going to run the play that the coach ran up. You're going to take the shot and you're going to shoot it as you've done 1,000 times before, because the only way the ball's coming to you is because for some reason the coach believes you can make it. So you probably played basketball before. It's not your first time. So just go out there and just let it go as it goes. And one of the most important things, especially at the professional level, is our focus is not on the outcome, but on the process. If your process is clean and you know you have a good process, then your only adherence is to the process. You can't adhere to an outcome because you can't control an outcome. When you're in business, for example, business means the exchange of money between people. You don't control if your prospect is going to say yes or no. You don't control if they have the money. You don't control if they have to go through the finance office or accounting or get signed off by 3 other people to get something done. You don't control that. You can find out, but you don't control the outcome. All you control is, did I do my process right? Did I frame the call properly? Did I go through the steps of my sales script? Did I present the offer the right way? Did I handle the objections properly? And if I did all that properly, some of the calls are going to go the right way, some of them are going to go the other way. But if I have good prospecting, good marketing, and good process, I'm probably going to make money and close more deals than I don't close if I follow my process every single time. That's what you can control. I'll give you an example of this outside of business. I've worked with a few men who are single and they're in the dating market, especially here in South Florida. It's a crazy dating market. So one of the things that I say to a gentleman I was talking to recently is that you don't control the outcome of the process. Because his thing was sometimes he would hesitate and overthink when he saw a woman, he'd be out in public, see a woman he's interested in, he would hesitate to approach. And then his hesitation would show when he finally did approach, and then he would fumble the conversation. I told him the focus is not on whether or not the girl says yes to a date or she gives you her phone number. The focus is, did you follow your process? Step 1, you see a girl you're interested in. Step 2, within 3 seconds, you approach. Don't overthink it. Don't think about what she's going to say, or if she has a boyfriend, or if she's going to think you look stupid. Just approach. You approach, you talk, you make your proposition. Hey, give me your phone number. Let's go on a date, etc. She says yes or she says no. You leave the situation clean regardless of what she says. That's the process. You do that every single time. You're going to get sharper at it. You're going to get cleaner at it. And eventually some people are going to say yes. You have no control over what they say. All you control is what you do. So that's what I tell people to focus on in any level professionally, is the process. You control that 100%. You do not control what another person is going to do.
What I love about this is that you mentioned the word earlier in this part of the conversation of preparation, like being prepared. And that is incredibly important when it comes to being able to follow the process when it matters. And I think about this. There's an example that I have coming back on the music side years and years and years ago. So I grew up in a small town in outback Australia, and like on a farm about half hour away. We went into town and there was a talent show, right? And it was in the town hall. Cruise there with my folks. I was probably 12, 13, something like that, roundabout. And I had my sheet music with me. There's this song that I was going to be performing on the piano. And as we get out of the car, I had my sheet music with me, and I go, I got this. Put the sheet music back in the car, and left the sheet music there. Walk in. As it's my turn, start off flawlessly. Like I'm just absolutely nailing it. And then I completely lost my place and royally screwed this thing up, right? And I realized it wasn't until 2017 that I had this realization. So what's that? Probably like 20, 30 years later, something like that, that there was a performance that I was giving on stage. It was actually the first talk that I'd given with the grand piano on stage, like blending these two things together from a keynote standpoint. And I realized that one of the subconscious pieces that were playing out was the question that I was asking myself. And that was, what if I screw this up again? And what I was basing it on, and I had this, it was a beautiful realization that I had. I was basing my current ability to execute on a previous person that wasn't prepared. I thought I was prepared, but I look at simply the amount of thousands of hours that have happened since then and go, this guy was just cocky, thought he had everything sorted and wasn't even close to being prepared. And so that preparation piece was so incredibly important. And the big insight for me is that I had been holding myself back based on a previous version of myself, rather than allowing myself to show up with who I actually was in that moment. And that was it was a big one for me. It was a really, really big insight. How do you find folks who have got limiting patterns of behavior, whether it's something like that or something else? How do we break free of something like that? And what have you found that works best?
What you were doing there, Cameron, was what we call time traveling. And time traveling is when your focus is on something that happened in the past or might happen in the future, but is not on what's happening in the moment. And presence is all about being grounded in the present moment, being actually your brain being the same place that your feet are, and being in this moment, observing the moment, feeling the moment, properly measuring what's happening right now, as opposed to thinking about, again, the past, the future, or something else going on in the world that's not where you currently are. So the way that people can regain that presence is really getting grounded. It's really being, as they say, down to earth, or some people call it touching grass. This is being in the space, turning off that internal narration that's in your head about what has happened in the past, or even your story about what you're seeing right now, and just observe what's actually happening rather than making a story about it. What happens with a lot of people, Cameron, is that even when they focus in the present moment, they try to interpret the present moment. Those are two different things. Interpreting the moment means you're creating a narration around what you see. So you see a mom walking by with 2 kids, you create a story in your head about the mom and 2 kids. Whereas being present and grounded means, I see a mom walking with 2 kids, but you don't try to interpret what that means. There's no, what does this mean? That question must be eliminated. That's when people start getting into their heads. They're asking themselves what it means. So anybody who's done any type of meditation or mindfulness exercises, the whole purpose of it is what? Allowing the thoughts to come into your head, but then letting them pass by like a cloud. so that eventually you can get to the point that when the thoughts try to come in, the monkey mind starts jumping around in that cage, it realizes it's not going to get out and it just sits down and relaxes. That's when you become fully present in the moment, when you're not narrating the present moment, you're just observing the moment. The example that I give is thinking of a predator. So predators, I mean literal predators like animals, crocodiles, lions, owls, eagles. These animals don't narrate what they're seeing. They just watch. If you go to the zoo, you see a crocodile. It's not moving. It's not doing anything. It doesn't perform when everybody's standing there looking at it, taking pictures. It's just observing the moment. It only moves for consequence. And the consequence is I'm going to eat a fish or a turtle or attack something. Otherwise, it's not moving. A lion, the same thing. An owl or an eagle, the same thing. Animals don't narrate the situation. They don't ask, what does this mean? They just observe and they act if necessary. Otherwise, they do nothing. Human beings, we have the ability to narrate our lives. And that narration is useful because it allows us to dominate animals who are often bigger, faster, stronger, but it also becomes a weakness when we can't be present in the present moment. And the technology we have access to today makes it harder and harder to stay present and grounded in the present moment. So hopefully I'm answering your question here. The key is turning off that internal narration and just being where you are in the moment. The past is over. The future may not happen. And wherever you're not at does not matter with regards to what you're doing right now.
I remember hearing Novak Djokovic, tennis star, share about from a mental toughness standpoint. I really admire his mental toughness. And I remember someone asking the question about, like, I think it was a 60 Minutes interview, and asking the question, or basically suggesting that his mental toughness was a gift. And he just stopped him in the tracks and just go, no. This has been worked on over a period of time. One of the things that I found really interesting about, I don't think it was in that conversation specifically, but it was something separate. And he said that the mind is a traveler. It'll go into the past. It'll go into the future. The key to mental toughness isn't that. It's how quickly can you bring it back? How quickly can you come back to what you're referring to, this presence? And I really love the removing the narration, right? The narrative, and just allowing it to be what it actually is. So if somebody's in that moment, then they're finding that they're telling the story is spinning. What specifically in that moment could they ask themselves or tell themselves or stop doing? Because if they've been doing it for a period of time, and I'm guilty of this at different times as well, where a story will start to spin, what could be done in that moment for somebody that would enable them to release that, remove it, and come back into the moment?
Well, the first thing is understanding this is a unconsciously programmed behavior, subconsciously programmed behavior. 85% of our thoughts and actions are unconscious and habitual. So it's, first of all, getting conscious about the unconscious, recognizing that you're doing it. So as soon as you recognize that you're doing it, you become aware, and you become aware of things, you can stop it. So you can catch yourself there. First thing you do is breathe. Deep breath in, 4 counts in, hold it for 4 counts, 4 counts out. So Take a deep breath in and just get present in the moment. Feel your body, feel your legs on the ground or your butt sitting in the seat, wherever you happen to be at. Feel the space that you're actually in. And then observe the environment where you are. See it just for what it is. Don't narrate it. Don't ask what it means. Just see yourself where you're at. That's the first step. And as you continue to breathe in deep into the belly and out, it stabilizes the mind and the body. When you breathe like that, the body gives a signal to the mind that we're okay. We're in a good space. There's nothing to be anxious or alarmed about. Because when you breathe deep like that in the belly, usually what are people doing when they breathe like that? They're meditating, they're maybe smoking something that they like, or they're sleeping. Those are all states of high relaxation. When you start breathing shallowly, that's when we're anxious, we're alert, we're looking around at something, we're starting to get into that fight or flight state. So deep breathing is a signal from the body to the mind that we must be in a good space, because there's no way I could breathe like that if I wasn't in a good space. So they work together. That's the first step to catching yourself in that space. You catch the thought, then you breathe, and then your body will start to relax, and everything else follows from there.
So then let's go. What is that following piece? Okay, let's say we're in a space where we're feeling calmer. We're feeling in a more neutral space, if you will. We're not maybe going into this, going into there, like past and future, for example, for those who are listening to the audio. What happens then?
Next thing, you ask yourself a question. Is there something of consequence that needs to happen right now? Is there some movement that I need to make to either get out of danger, something that is an actual execution that is necessary based on my current program? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, what is it? What is the next thing I need to do? Next action I need to take? What is it? And then take that action. If the answer is no, there is no next action I need to take. There's nothing of consequence that needs to occur right now. Then you do absolutely nothing. Again, go back to the predator. Think of the eagle when you see it in the zoo. It just sits there. It looks at you when you walk by and you're taking pictures, but it doesn't move because you being there is not a situation of consequence. It does not need to attack you. You are not going to attack it. It sees you there. It notes your presence, and then it stays right there where it is because you being there means nothing to it. Same thing with the lion. Same thing with the crocodile. They don't do anything unless something of consequence is occurring. Human beings, we do stuff for no reason, simply because we feel like we have to do something just because we have the capability of doing something. So the next thing is asking yourself a simple binary yes or no question. If it's yes, do that thing. If it's no, do nothing.
What would be an examples then? Because I would think the human doing something that is, it's almost maybe like the perceived consequence of, well, I perceive I'm in danger because I'm worried about the future. I'm dwelling on what's happened in the past, or some kind of narration that's happening here and now. What would be an example? Let's go pro sports and let's go in business. What's the specific example of something of consequence where an action needs to be taken? And then what's an example when no action needs to be taken, even if it's in a high pressure moment?
Let's say in a sports game, I'm playing in the game and there's a guy at the line shooting free throws and I'm off to the side. I'm on the court, but I'm not shooting free throws. And there's some fan in the stands talking crap to me from the stands. Do I need to do anything in that moment? The answer is no. I could engage him and say something back to him if I want to. I could ignore him if I want to. I could look and let him see that I notice him and do nothing. But I don't have to do anything. I can completely ignore him and just stay focused on the game. And what happens with a lot of players is they will start to engage that person. Some of them engage and it helps them. It helps their game go up. Some people. Most of them, what it does is it takes away from their game because now they're focused so much on that guy. They're trying to shut that guy up and it takes away from them doing what they have to do in the team concept. So that's an example of something that many people feel like they need to respond, but there's really no need to respond. You don't have to say something back to that person. In the business world, let's say you make a post on social media, on Instagram or Facebook or something like that, and somebody leaves a clever comment trying to be funny and it's kind of being negative at the same time. Do you have to respond to that comment? No, you don't have to respond to the comment, but many people say, well, I had to respond because what they said is actually factually wrong. They don't have the right information. They're trying to make my business look bad and they're trying to smear my name all at the same time. So I'm going to set the record straight and put this person in their place by responding to the comment. And I know I've been posting content on the internet for 20 years. I don't engage in comments nearly the way I used to. Nowadays, I don't even look at them. But I used to respond to damn near every comment. And I found, Cameron, that when someone comes in and they troll you by saying something negative just to get your attention, if you engage, you know what happens? More people troll you because they see that trolling you gets you to engage. And while all they really want is your engagement, they don't really believe what they said. They just want to see if they can get you to say something. Because now they're
poking the bear, right? They're poking the bear.
Yeah, exactly. Getting your attention is the win. It doesn't matter what they say or what you say back. It's just the fact they got your attention. And what happens technology allows us it creates this interconnected world, which is great in some ways. In many ways, we're having this conversation because of the interconnectedness of technology. And at the same time, it distracts us into thinking we have to engage just because we have the capability of engaging. That's the discipline, is not engaging when you don't need to engage. And you get to choose, not allow the technology to dictate to you that I have to just because I can. That's the difference.
I love that. So what about someone who does need to engage? What are examples in both of those scenarios where someone would be saying, yep, this is a time to act. This is a time to execute?
Sure. So when you're in the game and the ball gets passed to you and your team is running a play, you should probably do something. All right. You pass it or shoot it. All right. Pass, shoot, or dribble, because that's something of consequences happening in the game. You need to actually respond to that thing that is occurring. In the business world, let's say somebody leaves a comment and it possibly could affect business. Is a customer who's been trying to call your customer service line, they can't get through, they email, nobody's responding. Now they leave a comment on your Instagram like, hey, I've been writing you about this messed up order that never arrived at my house. It's been a week. Can somebody get back in touch with me so I can get my order? You want to address that. because that can hurt your business. This person might be a real customer. Let me find out. Did that email go to spam? Why is nobody returning calls from my customer service line? You want to make sure that one gets addressed because that affects the tangible execution of your business. So it's having a clear line as to what is an execution of consequence and what is not an execution of consequence. And it should be clear to everybody in your business or everybody on your team what requires a response and what does not require a response.
Do you recommend having those things, some of those things documented, especially on the business side of things? And there'd probably be game plans, I'm sure, as well. How important is it to have things documented so that you know when to execute and when not to?
It is of the utmost importance, especially for experts, high performing experts, people who start their businesses and you're the main reason the business exists, because usually it starts with all the knowledge up in your head. And if you don't document everything that you know and understand about how the business works, well, if something happens to you, then there the business goes with it. So it's documenting and codifying everything that's in your head such that your expertise becomes an asset in and of itself, which is what especially people in the knowledge space, I guess you could say I'm in the knowledge space. When you're in the information/knowledge space, you need all your knowledge to be on paper so that the knowledge itself is the asset rather than the human being the asset, because that way it frees the human up to do other things or to even move on if you want, even sell your business if you want. But you must create an asset that is independent of the human.
Well, this comes back to process as well, right? So it's ensuring that that process is ready to go. We're talking about the documentation of those pieces now. It'd be game plans. It'd be ways of executing when it comes to pro sports. It's different processes and procedures documented down to ensure that we're able to execute when it's needed. So a question for you then around role plays. I know just how important that is on the pro sports side. It's talked about a lot about being able to visualize, about being able to practice over and over again. I find that sometimes that gets missed in business where the repetition isn't strong enough. What are the suggestions that you have to ensure that when you're ready to take your shot, that you are ready, that you're able to follow that process, you know how to follow it, and also when to let things go if they're not a fit?
In business, let's say, for example, we talking maybe a salesperson on a conversation with a prospect.
Yeah, could be an example of that for sure.
Okay. Well, if we're doing that, then we literally role play the whole situation. So if I'm working with someone who's in sales, I will be the prospect and you be the salesperson, and I'm going to be belligerent. I'm going to interrupt you. I'm going to ask you questions that you don't expect. I'm going to be just a difficult prospect, and you got to be able to handle that. If you can handle that, then the prospects you actually deal with are going to be easy. So it's literally going through the gauntlet of role playing and practicing out how it's going to go. For example, Cameron, in college, as I told you, I played basketball. One of my coaches in college said to the team, my job as a coach is to make practice so difficult for you that the games are relatively easy.
I love that. That's so good. That's right, so
that
good.
Was his job. Like he said, I want to make practice so hard. So you all, when we get in the game, nothing that happens in the game is going to be new to you or too difficult for you to deal with because you've already seen it in practice. And anybody who's in sales where you're talking to prospects live, you should be role playing all the time. So this is insurance companies. You're selling mortgages. You're selling high ticket coaching, whatever it is that you're selling. If you're working the sales floor at Best Buy, you need to role play dealing with customers because you're going to deal with all different types of customers and you need to know how to engage with them. So what I do, one of the things that I do when I do sales calls, was mostly virtual on Zoom. I record every single sales call, and that can become a library of training for anyone else. If I ever hire people to do sales for me, there's their library of training. Or if somebody does this, here's how you address it. If somebody says something like this, here's how it's handled. And I think technology, back to that thing again, it can eventually, I think pretty soon there'll be tools where I can take every call I've ever done, dump it in there, and it can suss out, okay, if somebody says this, here's how Dre responds. Somebody does this, this is what you do. So where it can be like searchable. And now you can just pull that up anytime on your phone. Okay, here's what happens if they say this. And you can just pull it up anytime. The whole point being is you need the repetition. The whole point is you need reps. And sports is all about getting reps. You got to get game reps. Game reps is simulation or actual real situation dealing with a real person or a simulated real person, someone who knows how a real person engages, and you got to be willing to deal with them. Once you get smooth at dealing with them, then you're ready to go out there into the field, into the jungle, and do things of consequence.
How do you go about building the discipline then to ensure that role playing, in this case, ensuring that the reps are getting put in over and over again, because it takes a huge amount of effort to do that. And with somebody who is listening and there's these other different things that have to get done within the business, or even on the sports side, how do they go about making sure that it gets in the calendar? And secondly, how do they make sure that they actually follow through with what's in the calendar so they prioritize it?
Number one, that's the boss's job. Now, the boss's job is to make sure everybody role plays. If I'm running a sales organization and I got a bunch of salespeople making outbound calls every day, before you make a single call every day, we're going to spend the first 30 to 60 minutes. Everybody's going to role play. We're going to pair off and y'all going to role play. Today, we're going to role play when somebody says that's too much money. Today, we're going to role play what do you do when someone says, I got to talk to my spouse? What do you do if they say, I got to talk to the CFO? What do you do if they say, I'm not interested? All right. And we're going to role play all of those things. And if I'm the boss, I'm already going to have the material ready for that. If someone says this, here's 10 different ways you can respond to it. Someone says this, here's 15 ways to respond to that. Someone says this, here are the ways you respond to that. Here's the question you ask them back. And here's how you respond to it. And you want to go over these over and over again so that when you're in a sales call, and I've been in these situations where someone says, hey, that's a lot of money. Okay, you can't have just one response to that because they might say it more than once. So what do you say the third time they say it's a lot of money? Do you have enough material? And this is why you got to practice the material over and over again. And it's the same thing in sports. If you're playing basketball and you do a nice move on a guy early in the game, that's great that you did that move and you scored. The problem is now he saw that move. So you can't come down the next time and do the same move again. You just did it the first time. It's only so many times you can do the same move. You keep fooling the guy. Now he's ready for that move. Now, do you have another move? Do you have a counter move to that one? Then do you have a counter to that counter? Because high level people, especially in sales, you're dealing with professional people. They have other responses to the things that you do. In sports is a back and forth. So in tennis, you mentioned Djokovic. In tennis, you have a really good serve. Okay, you might overwhelm your opponent a little bit in the first game or set, but okay, now they're adjusted to your serve. All right, what do you have now that they can return your serve? All right, can you do something else that can put them in a bad spot? That's all you have, then they might end up beating you. So you got to have counters for the counter because there's always going to be something that comes back. And anytime something new surprises you, you go back into the lab and your practice time and you say, okay, now I know that might happen. Let me make my adjustment for that. So the next time somebody does it, I'm ready for it. And eventually you just built this library of skills to where anything that gets thrown at you, you can address it. You can adjust to it.
So good. One of the things I think about with that is I think of the power of alternatives. That if one thing doesn't work, then you've got another one, and if that doesn't work, then you've got another one. And the person who's got the most flexibility in a situation is going to be able to manage that situation better than somebody who's only got, say, one way of dealing with it or one way of solving it. So that makes a lot of sense. You said that about 20 years you've been creating content for. How did you get started with this, and how did you go about making your own decision as to what you were going to focus on and what you were going to let go of?
Sure. It started because I was playing basketball, and after graduating from college, I didn't have any offers to play professionally, and I knew I would probably play overseas somewhere outside of the USA. So I went to this event called an exposure camp, which is like a job fair for athletes. I played pretty well there, and they give you the footage from your games. And at this time, this is 2005, the footage was on this thing called a VHS tape. You remember those?
Yeah. So good old days.
Right, in the VCRs. So I took that, and those of you who are people under 30 listening to this, you can Google it if you don't know the VHS or VCRs. I took that to a audio visual store, and they took the VHS tape and they transferred the information, the video, onto a data CD. And that CD, I uploaded the footage onto this new website that said you can upload as much footage as you want for free. And it was called youtube.com. That's how I started putting out content. This is 2005. And I didn't put it out because I was trying to build a brand or become an influencer, because those terms didn't exist back then, Cameron. I was putting it out just because I had a VHS tape with material and I wanted to save it somewhere where it couldn't get lost. And I thought
that was the reason originally.
Yeah, that was the reason why I did it.
It was a backup system.
Exactly. Yes.
That's so good.
Because I had a VHS tape. Because if a VHS, it gets wet, you leave it in the sun, you lose it, the footage is gone. So the internet goes with you. So I just said, let me put it on this website. Maybe YouTube will be around for a while. And YouTube stayed around. So then eventually, about a year later, I got a digital camera. This is before we had cameras on our phones. So I got a digital camera. It was about $100 camera. And I would go to the gym every day to practice because, again, I'm playing pro basketball. So I just started bringing the camera with me to the gym, and I would just film what I was doing. I would record my workouts. And that was just because I wanted to see if I looked the way that I thought I looked when I was playing. I just wanted to see if I looked the way I felt. It wasn't for an audience. And because YouTube was already out, after that first video I put up, I left it there for a year, didn't look at it. But I went back to it, and the website still existed, and there were comments on the video, random people who I didn't know asking me questions like, hey, where do you play at? Who taught you how to play? How often do you practice? And I could tell by their questions that they were impressed by what they saw. So I said, well, I practice every day. So they're asking me about getting better at basketball. Why not just take this stuff that I'm recording, just put it on YouTube, pay it forward? I knew I was going to use the internet in some way at that time, Cameron, but I didn't know exactly how. So I just started putting the videos out, and it was sporadic. It wasn't like I had some content strategy. Again, content was not a word then. I mean, it was a word, but it wasn't a word, not the way we're talking about it. And I did that for a few years. And again, I'm back and forth traveling overseas playing ball. It was about 2009 when I started to focus on it more seriously because a couple of things happened. Number one, YouTube opened up this thing called the Partner Program where they said, if you have popular videos, you can put advertising on the video and we'll pay you money based on the advertising revenue. That was new in 2009. So I signed up for that. And I said, okay, well, I got a few videos that are popular and they pay me a little bit of money. Why don't I put out a bunch of videos that are popular and get a bunch of money? So that's when I decided to start putting out videos every single day. So my content strategy really started in 2009. Second thing that happened is I read this book called The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, which most people are familiar with. In that book, Tim Ferriss had a section where he talked about how to create and sell a digital product on the internet, because he was really talking about a lot of concepts of entrepreneurship, but it was altered for the digital world. About maybe 7 years later, I had read a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. He was talking about principles of entrepreneurship in general. That planted the seed in my mind. I'm a computer geek, a closet computer geek, Cameron. So when I came across YouTube, I got on YouTube, and then I read Tim Ferriss. He was talking about similar principles to Kiyosaki, but it was made for a digital world. So he said, here's how you do it on the internet. And based on the fact I had fans, all basketball players who wanted to learn basketball from me, but all I was giving them was YouTube videos for free. I was making ad revenue, but I didn't have my own products. I started making my own products. My first product was $4.99. And I remember the day I put the video out announcing the product, and it was all following Tim Ferriss's his strategy, how to do it. And it was very simple. 1-page website, put a product on there, get a little image, say what it does, put a price tag, and then put a button. When I put that out, the first night somebody bought the product, and I got an email that said, congratulations, you made a sale for $4.99. And when I made that sale, Cameron, I said to myself, this is going to be bigger than basketball for me. Putting material on the internet, getting someone to notice it, creating something higher level, putting a price tag on it, and they'll pay for it. I can't jump 40 inches in the air forever. At the time I could, but I knew I couldn't do that forever. I said, this right here, taking knowledge out of your head and turning it into money, I could do that forever. And that's how I knew that the internet was going to be my future. So I just created more programs. Independent publishing became a thing shortly after that, around that time. People started asking me more about the mindset side of sports. That's how we got to all the stuff we've been talking about here today, because non-athletes started finding my content when I started talking about the mental side of the game. That's how I got my entrepreneur professional audience. I was talking about the mental side of sports, but people were saying, hey, this stuff applies anywhere. This is not sports. This applies everywhere, Dre. I said, okay, great. And that's how I started to build that audience. Stopped playing ball in 2015, and I've been doing all of this since then.
What's really interesting about that is that you had your own moment, right? And I think by the sounds of it, it was that moment that you got that single $4.99 sale,
right?
Which enabled you to then say to yourself, whether you wrote it down or it was in your mind, of going, okay, if I could do that this many more times, then that's going to result in X, and that's a good strategy for me. And then it was, by the sounds of it, it was all in from there. Like once you got that $4.99 sale, was it all in immediately, or did it take some time?
Well, I was still playing basketball. I was playing pro basketball at the time. And when you're a pro athlete, you have a lot of time on your hands. A long day for us is like 4 hours of work. So you can do whatever you want. So I was on the internet. So I started making more programs. So I to this day, I have probably 100 or 150 programs created. So I made all these programs, just put them on the website and just let them sell through watch a YouTube video, click the link, buy the program. That's the way it worked. And then it became, I added books to that. I started making courses. So yeah, I went all in on it while at the same time, I already had a career playing sports. I just knew when I stopped playing basketball, these programs are not going to keep selling as much because I'm not going to have the content out. I understood the trap of these days. A lot of content creators are running into this. I don't know if you follow that world, but I see it a lot. Is that when you're a content creator, it's cool when you have a lot of fans and you're active, you're making the money. The problem is as soon as you stop doing the thing, the attention drops and the money stops. So I knew if I stopped putting out videos every day, I'm not going to be the popular basketball guy and my programs are not going to sell as much. So, and I knew I didn't want to keep making basketball content after I stopped playing. I wanted to transition into having conversations like this one. I knew I wanted to do this when I was still playing. When I'm done playing, I'm done. So that's why I started to build and try to come up with the frameworks for how do I help people who don't play basketball, because I can do that sustainably a lot longer than I can be the basketball guy. Because even if I wanted to keep playing ball, again, eventually your body can't jump that high anymore. So I didn't want to be a coach. I didn't want to be a trainer. I want to use my brain. I want to use my intellectual property to help people who also work on intellectual property. I didn't want to just limit myself to sports.
It makes a lot of sense. What was so 20 years is a solid amount of time. And I love when you start talking in decades about your life, especially when it's something that you like love and are immersed in and have just been obsessed over for, again, decades. What have been some of the biggest challenges that you've come up against over the past 20 years?
Well, right back to that same situation, 2009, the reason though I started focusing on what Tim Ferriss was saying is because I was actually in between playing jobs. I didn't have a playing job at the time. And I was asking myself, well, hey, if I don't get another playing job, because the sports world is similar to like the acting world. When you're in between jobs, you don't know if there's going to be another job. That might have been your last job. You think it's in between. In between means there'll be another one. It was no guarantee there'd be another one. So that's when I started asking myself, okay, well, what if I don't get another call? I don't get another contract. What can I do? And that's why I said, okay, let me see if I can monetize what I already have through the internet and through creating products. That was one challenge, but let's get out of the sports realm and just talk business. When I first was getting out of sports, this is about 2014 through 2016. Let's just say that 3-year span. And first thing I decided I was going to do, Cameron, was be a professional speaker, because I found out that there was an industry for that. I didn't know that even existed, that somebody will pay you money to get on the stage and talk for about an hour and you can make a lot of money. I said, that's great. I can do that. I can talk. So I was already making videos on YouTube talking, but I didn't have a lot of experience on a physical stage talking. So I would reach out to people, and I'm the type of person that I'll cold call, I'll canvas, I cold approach. I was cold calling event planners and venues, and anywhere I saw events, I would call and try to pitch myself or send emails. And I would get a good amount of resistance of people saying, okay. I would say my pitch was, I played sports. I created this whole thing my brand is called Work on Your Game. It's all about taking the mindset from sports and applying it to business. So they understood that. They would say, okay, do you have any examples of you speaking? They would always ask that. Do you have any examples of you actually on the stage? I didn't have any. So I was getting pushback based on that. So I said, all right, I got to get some examples of me speaking. So I go and join Toastmasters. You ever heard of Toastmasters?
Yeah.
So I joined Toastmasters in Miami Beach. And I would, literally, it was this little room. There's maybe 15 people in the room. I would prop my phone up on the windowsill, and I would speak, and I would record that, and I'll start putting that on my YouTube channel as a way of, hey, here's proof of me standing on the stage speaking. And then I just kept pitching myself. I would apply for, they would do calls for speakers where you're basically speaking for free, but you get the experience and the quote unquote exposure. And I did a bunch of those, 2015, 16, 17. I did a ton of free speaking gigs, and many of which I lost money because I was paying for the travel, the hotel, all this stuff. I did a ton of those, Cameron. And my mentor was a woman who was a full-time professional speaker, coach, consultant. And she said, Dre, the way you know you're a good speaker is not if they clap for you when you get off the stage. You know you're a good speaker when somebody comes to you and offers you to pay you to speak again when you get off the stage, when you get future business based on your current performance. And all those free gigs I did were leading to paid gigs. And that's how I started to build momentum as a professional speaker. And then the speaking led to, while I was doing speaking, of course, you sell books because you speak. People now know who you are. People start following you. People reach out for coaching, consulting. I did that till about 2020. 2020, we get the virus, the shutdown. So there are no live events. And at this time, I was starting to have some issues with the speaking business. What I didn't like about it mostly was two things. Number one is you're only as good as the last gig. Now, as soon as your last gig is up, you got to get another gig. I didn't like that. There was no sustainability in it. I said, this is the same thing as playing basketball. You're only as good as the current contract. As soon as the contract's up, you're a free agent again and you're jobless. I didn't like that. And the second thing was it wasn't my platform. Now, the thing about speaking is every time you speak, you're on somebody else's platform. I said, I need my own platform. I need a platform that I control so that I don't have to deal with these event planners and decision makers and this person got to go to this person and get signed off and I'm waiting a week to get my money. I don't like having to wait for my money. I didn't like any of this. So let me build something that I control. That's when I started to build out what we call Work on Your Game University, which is my in-house. And that's when I start focusing more on coaching, consulting. I still do speaking, but I don't do any outreach. I don't go calling people. I don't cold call. I don't pitch myself. You call me, we can make it happen if you have the fee. But nowadays, I don't go as much outreach. I'm more in-house and building up my own assets and brands and systems. We still do outreach. I think we reached you from outreach. We still do outreach, but we do outreach in a different way. So reaching out more on the enterprise level to try to get our systems into companies, not just speaking. Speaking is more of an entryway, not like the main thing anymore.
That makes sense. What's the, fast forward then over the next 5-10 years, what is your thing going forward? Is it work on your game and that's just the laser focus and that's where the time, energy and effort goes, for you and practicing what you preached, what you shared earlier? What does the next coming years look like for you?
Great question. Way to hold my feet to the fire here. So my company and brand is called Work on Your Game, but our main thing is structured execution. That's our thing, structured execution. So my job now over the next, not even 5 years, but really the next 5 months is making sure that we have a clean, sharp system that is the asset that replaces me as the asset. I'm the biggest asset right now. Today, if you had to ask, I'm the biggest asset for my company. But I'm building out the system so that the system is the biggest asset. So I can go to a company that has 300 employees and say, listen, this is our system for structured and disciplined execution that will help your team execute this much better on these 15 points that we notice. So I have the experience. So we have the data. These are the biggest things that cause people to not execute even when there's a system in place. So have you heard of something like EOS, Gino Wickman?
Yeah.
So a lot of companies use EOS. EOS installs
just for those listening, what is EOS though?
EOS stands for Entrepreneur Operating System, and it's a very popular system that a lot of entrepreneurs and small businesses use, medium-sized businesses use as well, that basically takes what the business is doing and it creates a system out of it so that everybody's operating from the same system within the business. And it's very popular, very, I guess we can say, successful process. The challenge is, I was just talking to a guy last week about this. His company uses EOS. The problem is some of the employees still don't do what the system tells them to do. So what my system does is close that gap. So EOS gives you the system. What we install is the execution standards that make sure you actually follow the system that is in place. That's what we do. That's why we call it structured execution. And my job now is making sure our system is tight. We have the data to prove that it works and getting it into companies to where they are getting the system that we offer. They're not getting Dre Baldwin because there's only so much Dre Baldwin to go around. I know I'm great, but there's only so much of me available. I want to make the system's going to be in the driver's seat.
Makes sense. You mentioned earlier about from a technological standpoint and when being distracted and that growing a little bit more, becoming maybe a bit more challenging. I can't remember the exact wording that you used, but I remember you sharing something in that space. I mean, just the sheer amount of change for one that's occurring and the uncertainty that is there. Probably a two-part question here. How does someone in the space and the face of extraordinary uncertainty bring their best self still? And then how do they ensure that they're not getting distracted by the things that can help them be more effective, but it can also result in them being more ineffective at the same time if they're not utilizing it effectively? So those two.
Number one thing is first thing is mental conditioning. That's part of doing your homework. And I tell professionals all the time that you thought homework ended when you graduated from college. No, it just started. All right. Doing your homework is not just preparing for the thing you'll tangibly do. It's also preparing yourself mentally. You mentioned Djokovic, and you said when a person was saying he has mental toughness, he prepared for mental toughness. You don't just get it in the midst of the situation. It's getting yourself ready mentally on a consistent basis so that when things do go left and unexpected circumstances do occur, you can deal with them because your nervous system is calm, steadied, and ready to deal with whatever happens to come about. That's work that you do ahead of time. That's pre-work. That's the one dealing with the uncertainty, so that you can.
Let's just pause on there for a moment. So to do that stuff, to be prepared, ready to go, is it much of what we spoke about already, or are there any extra pieces that people can be utilizing to work on the mental game?
Good question. Thank you for calling that out. So 4 pieces. When it comes to presence, because that's really what we call presence, is number 1 is the groundedness. That one we talked about, being your brain and your feet being in the same place. Mentally, you're focused in the very spot that you physically are. No human being can be in 2 places at once, and no human being can focus on more than one thing at a time. So focus where you're at and be where you're at. That's groundedness. Second piece of presence is called stillness. Stillness lessens any unnecessary output. That is, i.e., not using 10 words when you can use 5. Not fidgeting and moving around when you don't need to be moving. That's the example I gave you of the look at a crocodile. They can sit still in the water for 12 hours straight until it's time to move. And I'm not saying you need to do that. You don't need to be a mannequin, but not moving if you don't need to move. Not using any physical energy that is unnecessary. That's the stillness. The third one is containment. That is emotional energy not being used unless necessary. And it doesn't mean suppressing emotion. It means you feel emotion. You feel angry, frustrated, sad, disappointed, even happy. You feel the energy, but you don't allow that energy to leak out of you through expression. You contain it the same way that a battery is charged. The battery's charged, but it's not throwing all the energy out just because it's charged. It holds it and you use it when you need it. That's containment. So you keep your emotional energy inside. And when you have that strong energy within you that you're controlling, that radiates a signal. People can feel that. That radiates as presence. And then the fourth piece is calibration. When you have the first 3 in order, you're grounded, you're still, you're contained, you're calibrated. And calibration means responding proportionately to the situation in front of you. So if you ever seen a person overreact to something, that's an uncalibrated response. You see a person underreact. Something happens and they seem to kind of be slow, and it's almost as if it didn't register that it occurred. Their calibration is off, meaning they're not seeing the situation right. They're outputting when they don't need to, or not enough when they need to. Their emotion is not aligned with the situation. That's uncalibration. When you have all 4 of those in order, grounded, still, contained, and calibrated, that comes out as a signal that people can feel that we call presence. It's an energetic signal, and a signal exists only when you remove the noise. So that's kind of answering your second question at the same time. The noise is everything that technology allows you to engage in that is not of consequence specifically for you. Do you really need to respond to that comment on Facebook? Do you really need to scroll on your feed again? Do you really need to check your email again? Do you need to be doing those things? All of those create noise. They create internal noise. And when you have a lot of internal noise in your head, well, guess what you're not doing? You're not grounded because you're not focused in the moment. When a person is completely focused in the moment, not talking when they don't need to, not emotional energy when they don't need to, and they're perfectly calibrated to the situation, you feel them even if they're not doing anything. Yeah. You can feel their presence in the room. That's literally why it's called presence. So those are the 4 pieces that make that work. Does that answer the question?
It really does. I mean, as you mentioned, it answers both of those, because there's a full, like those 4 key pieces. That's a process in itself, and the ability to be able to execute on that over and over again, I think is going to become even more important as years go on, because we're being exposed to an ever increasing amount of potential distractions through the different pieces of technology, through the different mechanisms that could take our attention away. And we've got to take ownership of what we choose to utilize, how we choose to utilize it, how we go about communicating, and how we go about executing to ensure that we're getting the outcomes we're aiming to achieve, versus allowing our attention to be siphoned away almost. And right. That's enabling wherever that siphoning is going for that to get the outcome they're wanting, versus you getting the outcome that you're wanting and then utilizing the pieces of tech to be able to, when it's appropriate to get your specific outcome that you're shooting for.
Yes, exactly. So it's really making decisions for every human being, because the technology is useful if you're using it the right way, and what's useful for me may not be useful for you. and vice versa. And at different times, we can flip positions. So it's knowing what matters the most to you. And this is why that collapsed identity matters so much that we talked about at the top of this conversation, Cameron. And when you know what your collapsed identity is and what you're really about, your singular focus, it's very easy to make decisions about what to engage in and what not to engage in.
Really good. One of the things that's come through in many of the interviews now of having conversation with folks, and just in general as well, but definitely with some of these latest conversations, is the power of intentionality. Right? That intention, you can't be intentional unless you're clear on where it is that you're going in the first place, or at the very least, how it is that you're going to be able to go about executing to get that clarity of the outcome you're aiming to achieve. That intentionality is so incredibly important. And again, I only see it becoming more and more important as time goes on and as we're continuing to be exposed to this ever increasing amount of potential distractions.
Exactly. And on top of the fact that technology is getting good enough to start taking people's jobs. If it's not already, it's actually already doing it. So you need to be highly intentional about what you're doing, and you need to be good enough at what you're doing that people see you, the person, or whatever you, the person, offers as a better alternative than some technology that they can get for 1/100th of the price. That matters a lot. And that's going to be causing some real conversations that happen for a lot of people over the next several years.
Yeah, I completely agree. Hey, we have a rapid fire segment on the show called Your Edge. We got these 3 pieces of values, beliefs, and habits. First question, what's your number one value and why?
Executing on a disciplined and structured level consistently. Why? Because that's who I've always been, even before I could put language to it. And it's the very thing that from the time I got out of college to now has gotten me from where I was to where I'm at.
Have you built that? Was there a time? All right, let me ask this, and I know this is a rapid fire, but I want to dive down here to let's explore this for a couple of moments here. Was there ever a time that you weren't disciplined, or has this just been an innate thing that you've experienced throughout your entire life?
I wouldn't say it was innate. I think I picked it up from my parents. They got up and went to work every day, never bragged about it, never complained about it either, and neither of them did glamorous work like you and I do, Cameron. My dad worked at a factory pretty much with his hands. He did music as his passion project, but it was a side gig. My mom was in education, but neither of them was excited about going to work in the morning. I grew up around adults who dreaded Sunday nights because they had to go to work on Monday. But they went to work every day. So when I got into the sports world, then became an entrepreneur on the internet, things my parents knew nothing about, I took the same thing that was modeled to me at home and I applied it in my life. So it was from a very young age. I guess you can call that innate somewhat, but it was picked up. It was taught to me by demonstration.
You witnessed it in action and then modeled that going forward, which is your responsibility to model it versus somebody who maybe takes that and goes, oh, I don't want that. And so they go and do something else. And the way I see one big piece of discipline is you do what's required rather than what you feel like in a certain moment. And there'll be times that you feel like doing it, and that's all good. That's all well. And, it's amazing when those two line up. And absolutely, 100%, every single person who is and has developed a level of discipline, there are times where you do not feel like doing the certain thing. And your ability to do that anyway, there's some real character building that comes with that. And it sounds like that's what's happened over the course of many years, where it's, again, become part of who you are rather than something that you did because you modeled it from your parents.
Yes, that's identity, not behavior. Exactly.
Yeah. What's a belief that shaped who you become? And this could be a belief about yourself. It could be a belief about others. It could be a belief about the world.
Belief that shaped who I am. There's a lot. If I give you one that's on the top of my head right now, is that as people progress in life, most people tend to not change. They just get, I say this in a tongue-in-cheek way, but I'm not joking. They just get older, fatter, and uglier. And if you weren't at your high school reunion, don't worry, because only thing that changed, because all the people got older, fatter, and uglier. For the most part, they're the same person they were when you graduated.
How has that shaped how you've become then? Well, who you've become then?
The reason I say that is because I see myself as an exception. And the people who I work with and a lot of people who I know, they're exceptions to that. But most people are not exceptions. Exceptions prove the rule. They don't disprove the rule. And most people, once they finish puberty, let's just say age 25, they're done growing. They're done growing physically and they're done growing mentally. Studies have shown that people, after they finish their formal schooling, they never pick up another book the rest of their lives. They never read anything. They don't learn anything. They don't try to advance or get better. Most people get to a certain station and they're somewhere in their 20s. and they pretty much stay at that station. They may get a marginal improvement. They may get a raise at work. They may get a promotion or two, but they pretty much stay in the same stage. They stay with the same skill set. They don't grow, get better. They don't try to evolve or advance in any way. And it sounds cynical, but it's the truth. It's just the reality of humanity. Most people are not trying to grow and getting better. And any growth that is achieved involuntarily must be done consciously and intentionally. And most people, Cameron, are not conscious or intentional about growth. This is why they don't grow. It's just the reality of life.
For those listening, here's a challenge for you. How are you going to be an exception to the rule as well? All right, what specifically are you going to do that's going to enable you to become the greatest version of yourself and continue growing and evolving well past when most others have stopped? Next question. What's a habit that you can't live without, or a routine or a ritual? And this could be a daily habit right out to an annual tradition. You can go a mix of both if you like. What's a habit that you can't live without?
Habit that I can't live without. I was just talking about this to some people earlier today, is that I have a morning routine. Some people call it, I go and work out every day, and I don't miss a workout unless I physically cannot get out of the bed. If I can't get out of the bed, I'll miss a workout. But other than that, I haven't missed a workout in 30 years. And I use working out, really is just symbolic, but it applies to the way that I operate, period. I'm just using that as something that everybody can understand. But that's a habit that is not even a habit. It's part of who I am. It's identity.
Yeah. Again, that comes full circle. That identity is so incredibly important. You build that in, it becomes who you are. All of a sudden it feels weird. It'll feel weird for you not to go to the gym, right? It's just not, it's a non-negotiable. It's a must. Yeah.
Exactly.
Love that. Hey, where can people go to find out more when it comes to the work that you're doing?
They can just go to workonyourgame.com. Workonyourgame.com. Anything you need will be right there.
Yeah, perfect. Dude, great conversation. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Well, I appreciate the questions. I appreciate you sharing your platform. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolute pleasure. And for those listening, we'll have everything that was mentioned linked in the show notes at CameronAtlas.com/podcast. We've got some great new guests coming up, so make sure you hit that follow button, leave a comment, and until next time, go and write the next line in your story. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode here on The Edge of Possible.